Hello, I am a grandmother in my 60s. I succeeded in running a local restaurant, even at an advanced age. My father passed away when I was young, so I grew up poor. My mother raised me and my two younger brothers alone, working at a market. While watching my mother struggle, I grew up with the idea of working as soon as possible to help her. As soon as I graduated from technical school, I joined a small company as an accountant. When I received my first salary, I was so happy. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. I was so pleased to buy gifts and food for my family. I worked hard to support my younger brothers. As I got older, I was able to move to a bigger company as an experienced worker and earn higher wages. At that time, my mother could stop working and stay at home. I love that my mother no longer has to work hard, but she insisted that I shouldn't work all the time and tried to set me up on blind dates. She said I still needed to help support my brothers for another 2 years, before they graduated from college. However, my mother said I should stop worrying about the family and start looking for my own happiness. She encouraged me, and I ended up going on a blind date where I met my husband. He said he would help pay for my brother's tuition and asked me to marry him. Without worrying about it, I was honestly moved by his words, as I was also attracted to him. I trusted my husband's word, and we got married. At that time, he was running a small manufacturing parts factory. Even though he wasn't making much money, we worked hard to put my brothers through college. I had a beautiful daughter, who was so adorable I would die for her. I lived each day happily watching her grow. I wanted to give the best to our daughter, as much as possible. Although I couldn't attend university, I wanted our daughter to go to college and do everything she wanted. Like everyone else, I gave her private lessons and worked hard to train her in arts and music. As if my daughter knew how I felt, she kept up well, studied, got good grades, and went to a pretty good university. Later, she passed the civil service exam. I threw a big neighborhood party to celebrate. She worked in the tax department and moved to a city. She told me she would come home often, but when I sent her to the big city, I couldn't help but cry. After a few months, it was time for her to come home for the weekend, but we hadn't heard from her. I started to worry and went outside to wait. I could see my daughter in the distance. I was so happy to see her and ran towards her to find she wasn't alone. There was a tall man beside her. However, she kept trying to send him away. I hesitated whether to approach to greet him, but he turned and left. Then I called my daughter. When she got home, I asked about him. She said he had been pursuing her for some time. I asked if he was her boyfriend and if I should have said something to him, but it felt strange to think that my daughter had grown up now. I always thought of her as a child, but she had grown to attract a man's attention. I felt proud of her and at the same time, sad because time had passed so quickly. I think all parents feel this way about their children. I asked my daughter what kind of man he was. She heard him at a party once, and since then, he had continued to contact her. His mother was a big real estate investor, and he came from a wealthy family. She said his family would move to a city near our neighborhood as they had built a big house there. She found out that he was actually from our neighborhood, so they were returning to their hometown after making a lot of money. I told my daughter that she should try dating him. It might seem that I was being very materialistic, but since I grew up poor, I just wanted my daughter to marry someone wealthy and live comfortably. I didn't want her to inherit poverty. As I raised her with all my heart, I wanted her to be well treated. However, my daughter said that the man's family was very rich, and this was a burden for her. Even so, I told my daughter she should get to know him better, regardless of his background. If the man was good, that shouldn't matter. In retrospect, I was being greedy by trying to connect my daughter to a good family. A few weeks later, my daughter came home and announced that she had started dating the guy. When I heard this, I was so joyful. And eventually, as I had hoped, my daughter married him. On the day my future son-in-law came to our house, I couldn't say anything because I was crying. My future son-in-law, who seemed relaxed, said, "Mother-in-law, please don't worry. From now on, I will take good care of Brenda without any difficulties. I didn't know much, but our family wouldn't have financial problems. Since my future son-in-law told me everything I wanted to hear, I felt that everything was resolved. It wasn't my daughter who liked him first, it was he who pursued her. Therefore, I believed he would be good to her. Since he was the only child and his family had money, I believed that my daughter would never worry about money. Besides, he seemed to have a good personality. What more could I wish for? My husband, who is usually quiet, became very talkative whenever our son-in-law came to visit. Seeing this, I felt they were afraid to meet. It wasn't as if I didn't have concerns because there was a big difference in our standard of living. When I investigated his family, they were known for their great wealth. I knew something through my daughter, but not to that extent. Additionally, our financial situation was tight. I was worried whether we could maintain the financial standard of the in-laws in preparation for the wedding. I was also concerned that my daughter would be looked down upon because of our financial situation. My son-in-law must have noticed my concerns and said, "Mother-in-law, we have decided to prepare our wedding on our own, so please don't worry about anything except helping choose the furniture for our new house." From the beginning, we had agreed to do so. Now we could prepare the wedding. We had money saved for Brenda's wedding, so don't worry and ask your parents how we should prepare the wedding. However, our son-in-law insisted and refused our financial help. "No, mother-in-law. If I let you do this, Brenda will be angry with me. It was the first promise I made to her when we met. If you continue to insist, I will be in a very uncomfortable position. Please don't worry. Your parents would feel bad about this. You are their only child, I'm sure they would want the wedding to be prepared and receive gifts like anyone else." No, I already talked to my parents about this, and they also agreed. I was grateful but also felt sorry that our son-in-law was considering our financial situation. He was so kind and caring to our daughter that I felt he would never let her suffer. Then the day to meet his parents arrived. When we went to the city to meet them, his mother was very gracious and made a good impression on me. She wore a black dress and carried a simple bag, but she looked elegant. "Our son is a bit immature, but I hope you look upon him kindly. It must be sad to send your daughter, who grew up so well, away. We will consider her as our daughter and treat her well. We only have gratitude. Our daughter has her flaws, but I ask that you understand and look kindly upon her." I felt that she was being very careful in speaking, since it was such an important occasion. They seemed polite and relaxed, people who grew up with wealth and received a good education. After we finished our meal and said our goodbyes, we took a taxi with our daughter, who pointed to the fence surrounding the house, saying it belonged to her in-laws. My husband and I were surprised by the immense size, something we only saw in TV dramas. Even without seeing the interior, I was sure it would be grand. I wondered who would live in such a house, but our daughter was marrying into such a family. Internally, I rejoiced, thinking that you never know how life can unfold. The wedding went well, and our daughter started her newlywed life. I thought we had overcome all the problems when my husband's job closed its doors due to the economic crisis. We were helpless, without income. A friend came and suggested that we open a Chinese restaurant together. I was worried, but my husband said he wanted to try. In fact, he had a license as a Chinese chef. A friend came to see us because he knew this fact. I used to joke that my husband could open a restaurant whenever he cooked for me, but when reality hit, I began to worry. This was because cooking at home and cooking for a restaurant are different. My husband reassured me, saying it wasn't a completely new field for him. Cooking was what he liked to do and something he did well. With his retirement, we were thinking of opening a restaurant or at least a barbecue place, but this was better. I decided that worrying wouldn't get us anywhere, so I started helping my husband. It was strange since it was the first time we did this, but my husband's friend had experience and was very capable. I decided to trust him and join them. At first, the work wasn't easy. We had few customers and faced many difficulties. I even made deliveries to save money on labor. My husband was against it, but I insisted. However, my husband's friend said he would handle the deliveries and asked me to work at the register since I was an accountant. He said I would be better at it than he was. I ended up being the cashier of the restaurant. We were so busy that I had less time to talk to our daughter on the phone. She also seemed very busy, so she didn't contact us often. Meanwhile, the three of us worked hard, and the deliveries and in-house customers increased. We kept it a secret from our daughter that we had opened a restaurant. We didn't want her to worry about us since it hadn't been long since she got married, and we wanted her to fully enjoy her newlywed life. We also didn't want to attract attention from her in-laws. It was a marriage with a significant age difference, and I thought I would tell our daughter about the restaurant later. Occasionally, our daughter would call us, but we didn't mention her for a while. So I called to ask if something was wrong. She replied that she was very busy and therefore couldn't call. I felt relieved to hear her cheerful voice. One day, a TV crew appeared and asked if they could film in our restaurant. Since we had the ingredients, we said yes. It seemed to be a famous TV show. After the filming, there was a substantial increase in customers. Our restaurant became known as a popular place for Chinese seafood soup. It was so famous that even people from other cities came to our restaurant to try it. Because of the many customers waiting for a table, we started to worry. The three of us tried to find a solution and decided to rent the ground floor of the building next door. It was connected to our space, so we didn't need a separate kitchen and could use it as an extension of the dining area to serve food. After expanding the place, sales increased significantly, solidifying our restaurant as the trendy spot. It was always crowded. If it continued like this, with a bit of exaggeration, we could buy a building. At that moment, I thought about telling my daughter about our restaurant. One day, our partner friend went to make a delivery but returned looking unhappy. Even though we had hired delivery drivers, he helped when it was very busy. I feared that some customer had been rude to him, so I served him tea and asked what had happened. He said seriously, "Have you talked to Brenda lately?" "Not very often, but we talk from time to time." "Why do you ask?" "The place I went to deliver today seems to be your family's, and something is strange." The in-laws had recently moved to the neighboring city. My daughter still worked in the city, so she continued living there and didn't move with the in-laws. "You must be mistaken. Why would they order from so far away? We get many orders from that city. Why don't you call Brenda and check?" After seeing our partner's worried expression, I felt uneasy. So I called our daughter. "Brenda, how are you? Is everything okay? And your husband?" "As always, he is fine too." "Is your husband treating you well? He pursued you so much, he has to treat you well." At that moment, my daughter was silent. After a while, she replied, "Of course, he treats me well, Mom. I'm very busy, I'll call you later." Even though she spoke more cheerfully than usual, I felt a weight in my heart. I couldn't concentrate on work after what our partner said. I tried calling our son-in-law, but he didn't answer. I comforted myself thinking that no news is good news. Then one day, our partner urgently called me. "The delivery order is from your son-in-law's parents. They don't know you have a Chinese restaurant, right?" "Yes, I haven't told them." I felt uncomfortable. Then I said that I would make the delivery myself, but our partner insisted that he would do it since it was for my in-laws. "And about that house, what did you see that you're hiding from us? You should have told us." "I'm going crazy with curiosity, I want to go myself." It seemed they had discovered and ordered many expensive dishes. The fences were so high that I couldn't see over them. I rang the doorbell, and the door opened automatically. I crossed a large garden and entered the house. The living room was full of people. When I started placing the food and looked inside, I couldn't believe what I saw. My daughter, who was supposed to be at work, was on her knees cleaning the stairs with a mop while the guests enjoyed themselves in the living room. She looked so thin and pale. Your mother-in-law had to help me set the food in the dining room and yelled at my daughter. Don't you have any common sense? We have guests eating. It's going to take all day to clean up like this and make the guests lose their appetite. Hurry up. Sorry, I'll finish soon, my daughter replied weakly. That's why you're useless. How can you lack common sense? You should have finished cleaning before the food arrived. Do I need to teach you everything? How did you pass a civil service exam? Someone must have done it for you. If my son hadn't threatened to kill himself, I wouldn't have accepted someone as useless as you into our family. Sorry, I'll clean up later. Do it now. How can you leave something unfinished? That's why it's important to check the family before marriage. You haven't learned anything, since your family has nothing. If you grew up in a poor family, at least you should have a sense of work. You're completely useless. No wonder your husband is having an affair. If he sees you sulking all day, do you think he wants to come home? Do your parents have any goals? They married you off with nothing. They never show up. If they knew we moved, they should have come to greet us. They have no manners. Who could you have learned from, being their daughter? I was paralyzed, speechless, by what my daughter's mother-in-law was saying. I was holding the plate of food, trembling. I must have witnessed this, which is why he asked me about our daughter. Why was I so naive as a mother? How could I not see? I blamed myself. I decided to rescue my daughter from this hell. I unwrapped the food and poured it over my mother-in-law's head. Are you crazy? My mother-in-law jumped as the food got into her eyes and she screamed in pain. I grabbed the bucket of dirty water and threw it on her face. Is it better now? Should I throw another bucket of water? I'm afraid your thick face is dirty. She recognized me and started shouting. What is this? Have you gone mad? Exactly, I've gone mad. How dare you do these things to my precious daughter and expect me not to lose my mind? How can you compare my daughter to your useless son? She is so much better. How can he not have a job at his age? How can you compare your lazy son, who depends on his parents, with my daughter, who works for the government? Do you want to ask people on the street to see who is better? Just because you have some dirty money, you think you can live with your nose in the air, but do you think you can hide your horrible personality with money? Hey, what did you say? Hey, get this crazy woman and her daughter and throw them out of here. Let's go. Even if they ask us to stay, we won't stay in this garbage for a second. I took my daughter out of that house and took a taxi back home, crying the whole way. I felt as if I had pushed my daughter into a hellish place. I wanted to slap myself for being blinded by money and pushing my daughter into that infernal hole. Thinking of our daughter living with those despicable people made me feel like going insane. I was disappointed in myself. Who was the fool, thinking my daughter would be happy and live in luxury for the rest of her life in that rich house? Money is not synonymous with integrity. I deeply regretted it. When we got home, I hugged our daughter and cried. Still, my daughter apologized for making me worry. I told her not to say that, as it was a marriage I pushed her into. I would take care of everything. I asked her to tell me in detail what happened and not to leave anything out. As soon as she got married, her husband started having affairs with different women because he was a womanizer. He was already infamous, and that's why he couldn't find a bride to marry. The reason her parents approved the marriage, despite our big difference, was because of this. Since my daughter worked for the government, it was convenient for them to maintain a good reputation by saying they married sincerely, looking only at the person. Shortly after the marriage, her mother-in-law demanded that my daughter quit her job. At that time, her husband was living with another woman. Her mother-in-law didn't want my daughter to get a divorce and basically trapped her to hide the truth about her son. She dismissed all the house staff and kept only one maid, putting my daughter to work as a servant. When I heard this, I trembled with anger. I couldn't let them get away with it. So, I convinced my daughter to fight back. First, I hired the most expensive and competent divorce lawyer to start the process. I hired a private detective to find and gather evidence of my son-in-law living with his mistress, and found witnesses who could provide testimonies about my daughter being imprisoned. Fortunately, the money we earned from the restaurant could be used for this. But it wasn't the end. Who was our daughter? She worked in the tax office. So she used her knowledge and decided to ensure that taxes and fines were collected, something that property owners fear the most. While our daughter was imprisoned and forced to clean every corner of the property, she uncovered their dirty secrets of hiding money and avoiding taxes. She organized everything well and sent it to the IRS, reporting all the necessary details. Fortunately, my daughter's co-workers came to her aid, so it was resolved quickly. Working together, her in-laws ended up facing a huge amount of back taxes and fines. The amount owed to the government was enormous. My daughter drew a map of where the properties and money were hidden to inform the government. Thus, her in-laws were practically stripped of everything. Then my daughter won the judgment, won the case, and received her alimony. She could have sued the mistress, but since she testified validating that my daughter was imprisoned, she didn't do that. She was determined to return double what was done to our daughter. After almost 2 years of struggle, that family was devastated. The criminal trial for imprisoning our daughter and subjecting her to habitual physical and verbal abuse is still ongoing. It won't be resolved with a fine but with prison sentences. They also hired a renowned law firm, desperately trying to avoid prison. However, I'm not worried now. I'm confident that we can protect our daughter, especially since we have the money to do it properly. One day, her mother-in-law came to our restaurant. She no longer seemed elegant and graceful but a worn-out old woman. Please withdraw your lawsuit. Since you've taken our house, our money, isn't that enough? Now you really need to send my son and me to prison to feel better? I was the one who made the mistake. Please forgive me and cancel the trial. She had never shown her face to apologize before, and now that she's facing prison time, she's asking for forgiveness? How dare she come with that dirty and shameless face? Right, you loved taking that money to ruin a person, didn't you? Cancel the trial? Wake up. You should have taken care of your own son. How dare you make my daughter suffer? Now you must taste your own poison. Forgiving you after everything you did to my precious daughter? Never. I won't cancel or forgive. You deserve the punishment you're getting. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bowl of dirty dishwater, and threw it at her. She screamed and ran out of the restaurant. Only then, seeing her run, did I finally feel better. You never know what will happen in life, no matter how much money you have. I learned that lesson and try to be as kind as possible to everyone I meet. My daughter left everything behind and got a job. Although she says the work is hard, she seems so happy now. My daughter doesn't need to get married anymore. So what if she lives alone? If she works in what she loves and is surrounded by good people, that is happiness. I only wish for my daughter's happiness. And if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share this story.